this is why, Chronometer's not just turning around saying, everyone's different. All right. And sorry, Rob just made that adjustment. We are good.
Yeah.
So,
I just checked them.
So basically I'll have someone get on the 35, 35, 30, 35 protein, 35 carbs, 30 fats for about 2 weeks. And what I ask them to do is really to try make sure there's not a lot of variability in there. I think what happens is we start throwing in cheat meals and we start throwing in things that are just inconsistent. And then we're never really able to see how the body's going to adjust. And I know when I have actors or even myself prepping for something, it is as important to me that they are healthy internally, as good as they look externally, right? Like I want to make sure their hormones and that their body is responding a certain way. And I really believe that when there are a lot of factors and a lot of variables day in and day out, then it's pretty difficult to determine how our body's responding. And let me give you an example. If you drop carbs on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but you had a huge cheat meal on Sunday, or you had 4 or 5, 6,000 calories that day, your body's going to have enough energy. It's going to have enough fuel in its system. And you're going to hold that for potentially a couple of days, depending on your activity level. So I do find that a couple of weeks in is when we truly understand what our body begins to do. Does energy start dropping, right? Like, do we start feeling a bit flat? These are all really good indicators that we might be in too much of a deficit, or we might be not too active, but we might be more active than what our calories are really supporting. So Jacqueline, to simplify it, give it 2 weeks where there's no variability. And then at that point, I start asking questions. How's your energy level feel? How's your body composition? How's your sleep? How's your mood? How are your workouts? How are your clothes fitting? I don't even really go so much off the scale. How are your clothes fitting? Because sometimes as we begin to bump calories, for a lot of you who aren't used to consuming more carbohydrates, and Chronometer gives a great recommendation, but I think that has to be earned in time. For every gram of carbs you consume, you're pulling in 2 to 3 grams of water. So when you're having more carbohydrates, your body's going to retain more water. And I find after a few weeks, our body starts losing that level of water retention, and our body begins to normalize a bit. And then at that point, it's like, all right, I'm getting more hungry. Oh, I dropped a buckle size on my belt. My energy level is really good. My sleep is really good. I'm like, all right, keep your foot on the gas. Or it could be, I am starving. Like I wasn't hungry a few weeks ago and now I'm really hungry. And, we're not fully up to the calories that Chronometer is recommending, but now let's bump them, right? So I think to eat, it's different for every person.
We have questions in a couple different places. We have it in the chat, which is great. We also have it in Q&A. Someone was just quickly asking about how do you manually log exercise. That's Joan. Super simple, Joan. If you just you open your Chronometer app, I'm assuming that you're on the app, you press the orange plus button, which is on the bottom, and then a menu comes up, and then you just hit add exercise, search for the exercise, and then you can add how long you did it, and then add to diary. If you need any questions about that, we can drop a link for how to add exercise into Chronometer for you as well.
All right, I just went through a couple of the questions. Metabolic health is just as important. I agree, totally agree with that. And that's a big problem in the bodybuilding world, especially, is that a lot of bodybuilders are more interested in just how their body looks. And, I'm more concerned with what's going on internally. So are we getting a good array of micronutrients? How powerful is the food that we're eating? And I think as you get comfortable with Chronometer, it kind of gamifies it a little bit. You start going in there, you're like, all right, where's my fiber? All right, I like to try and stay above 40 grams of fiber every day. Am I in that range? Where are my vitamins at? Right. And then you start playing a bit of a game, and then you start recognizing when you consume different foods, specific numbers jump, and I think it becomes fun. So Aaron Atkinson, I'm sorry, I just skipped a question. I see Jennifer Cope. Should one of our protein goals be to eat enough proteins to match the exercise protein status shown each day in our tracker? I exercise about 2 to 3 hours a day, and usually that means a lot of proteins needed. Now, just because, and Jennifer, great question, by the way, but Jennifer, just because you're exercising 2 to 3 hours a day, I'm unsure what type of exercise is it. And I am not going to I'm not going to assign you, remember, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to say prescribe. I'm not going to assign you protein according to your exercise. I do believe in staying around the gram per pound. Now, what happens with chronometers sometimes is that the number might seem high. And I really look more at animal protein. So if I'm 212 pounds, which I am, and I'm consuming a gram of protein per pound of body weight, then the math would be I'd be at 212 grams of protein. But because my number's higher, people are like, well, you're consuming more. Well, obviously, if my goal is to put on muscle, I might go a bit higher because I need more calories and I'm a bit active. But if you also just took the protein I'm receiving from animal-based proteins, it'll probably be closer to that 212 to 220 range. I might be at 250, but that might be from quinoa and nuts and other types of foods that don't always have that complete amino acid, that full spectrum of amino acids. A lot of the plant proteins don't bring in branched chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. So I would be concerned less with the activity for your protein. I wouldn't, because you're training 2 to 3 hours a day, I wouldn't think about driving that up. But I would follow the chronometer recommendations. But if it comes in a lot higher than what you've been consuming, Jennifer, so for instance, I have no idea what you weigh, but I'm going to make up a number right now, just for the fact of making it up. I'm making up 150 pounds. Let's say you're 150 pounds. Let's say you're 200 pounds. 200 pounds is even easier. It doesn't matter. But if you're 200 pounds and you're consuming 120 grams of protein, yet chronometer is recommending 215 grams, I'm not expecting you to go from 100 grams to 215 grams overnight. I might tell you now over the next 4 weeks that we're going to slowly start bumping it up. Because if I was to increase your protein by about 110, 115 grams, that's over 400 calories overnight. That might be a lot for anyone to handle. So what I might do is I might say, you know what, if we're jumping at 100 grams of protein, I might do 25 week 1, 25 week 2, 25 week 3, 25 week 4. Now we've increased it 100 grams. So I'd be more concerned with where your body weight's at. If your activity level's high and you're following the chronometer recommendations, whether you're sedentary, light active, moderately active, highly active, follow those. And then the number you're giving, a lot of times in my community, people are like, well, that's a lot higher than where I'm at. So we take our time bringing it up over time, because we can't always remove. Caloric deficits are something that are abused, and I think people go to too quickly and they go to too often. And when you're going to a calorie deficit too often, a couple of things are going to happen. One, calories are energy. If you're not having enough energy in your body's really smart. It's not like a car where if you don't put enough gasoline in, it's going to run out of gas. That's the analogy I always give. But your body, if it's not consuming those calories, now it's going to say, no, I don't have enough energy in my body right now to support my activity. I better slow down. And that's what happens. And our metabolism in time slows and our energy level slows. And then we want to lay on the couch and we don't want to be active and we don't want to take the stairs and we feel lethargic and our sleep quality plummets. So so that's why I think in time, those calories have to be earned. Sorry about the rant, but that's what I do. Elisa, we got another question here. Aaron Atkinson, you want me to keep going or you want to read them?
There's some in the Q&A as well, but yeah, let's do Aaron's. Absolutely.
I'm constantly struggling to stay near my carbs, especially if I have a lot of fruit or oats with breakfast or jasmine rice or lunch. How much over is too much? Also looking for ways to get my fats closer to goals. I think fats are pretty easy because we can always just do a tablespoon of like olive oil, and right there, if you're 15 grams off, you just solve that, right? There's some fats like macadamia nuts, a very healthy fat, but high in fat. Like you can do a handful of those, and that's going to probably make up about 20 to 30 grams, depending on how big your hand is. So, I think there are easy ways to really bump those fats and add them onto meals. Excuse me. It's just simple math, right? So if you're looking at a day and Chronometer's recommending that, I'm going to make this number up, that you're at 100 grams of fat for the day, making the number up. It's a nice even number. And you're eating 5 times a day, then it's 20 grams a meal. So you got to start looking at your meals. And if you're having a protein shake, and most protein powders aren't having much fat in there, it might have a gram or two, then you got to make up 18 grams. And if you don't do that, then you got to make it up later on. And that's where the problem is. So I think fats and carbs, it's the exact same thing. Now, if you consume a lot of carbs at one meal, or you have a big, and I find this with people trying to put weight on, when they eat so much at one meal and they don't balance it out throughout the day, then they're not hungry for the next 4 or 5 hours. And then they're losing opportunity. They're losing that opportunity to consume the nutrition that they need. So what I really recommend you guys doing is, Cronometer is going to give you your protein, your carbs, and your fats. It's that simple. Don't even worry about calories. I would not even count calories. Look at your protein, carbs, and fats. Figure out the math. If each meal is, and I'll give you an example. For me, if I'm at 300 grams of carbs, which is what I use to prep for a shoot, let's say 250 grams of protein, and I'm at about 100 grams of carbs, and I'm dividing that by 5 meals, that's going to be 60 grams of carbs a meal. That's going to be 50 grams of protein a meal. And that's going to be 20 grams of fat a meal, right? So guys, when you start looking at it as math and you start laying out the timing of your meals, this becomes really easy. If we're frivolously just weighing food and like, oh, my breakfast, I had 3 eggs and, I had a bowl of fruit and an oatmeal, though this sounds like a very healthy meal, for someone my size, having 18 grams of protein through eggs, just not enough. Because 3 large eggs is going to come out to roughly 6 grams of protein a meal. My fats might be okay, because I might be up at around 18, 20 grams now. I'm close to that number I was just mapping out for you. But my protein is going to be low. So now those other 4 meals, I really have to focus on driving that protein up. So Aaron, it's just math. Look at your total number, divide it by the amount of meals that you're having. If it's 3 meals a day, that meal volume has to increase. If it's 4 meals a day, maybe the volume decreases a little bit. If it's 5, it'll decrease a little bit more. Figure out the math, write it down on paper, and then make mistakes in the beginning. This isn't something you're going to nail out of the gate. Make some mistakes. Give yourself a month. Literally, give yourself a month to turn around and make this somewhat habit, and then I promise you, good things are going to happen.
I think it's always changing too. I don't think that my goals are ever really linear. Like, I have different periods in my life where I'm more active, and typically in the winter, oddly enough, I'm more active than in the summer, and I have to adjust accordingly. So I think it's always evolution. My dear friend, Steph Johnson, Dawn.
Oh my God. I just saw her. She's amazing. Miss Texas. I love her.
We love her. She asked a great question, actually. Do you recommend turning off the option to replace settings with imported activity data? I
don't use the imported activity. I just, and I work with Oura and I love Oura. I use Oura mainly for my sleep. I like there being a consistency with my calories day in and day out. And I try and nail that number. And after a period of time, if I feel like I start getting hungry, I'll throw in something called a refeed, or maybe that's my opportunity to have a cheat meal, right? For the last, to be honest, when we were in Mexico the last 2 weeks, it was very difficult for me to track because I didn't have a scale and we were having 3 meals and I was just trying to get as many calories in as possible. But by the end of that trip, I lost a few pounds, right? And I felt a little flat. So I went to the airport and I just crushed a burger and had a couple of French fries, and it kind of filled me up, and I felt great. And I feel like that really replenished me. So I'll save the cheat meals for times where I really feel like I need them. I won't just frivolously throw them in for the sake of throwing them in, or for the sake the fact that people are like, oh, well, I have my cheat meal once a week. Well, that means I need to also. Like, there's so many factors. Guys, training intensity is still really important. We always put this on nutrition, but I've seen people who've maintained the same nutrition and we've changed training intensity up and their body composition completely changes, or their program completely changes. So, I'm happy that a lot of you are exercising, but pay attention to training intensity. And if you can, and the variability of those calories changing day in and day out, though I think it's very useful for certain people. If you're trying to nail it out of the gate, turn the activity off, make sure that there's no variability in those numbers day in and day out, nail those numbers. And then when you start nailing those numbers, you can import your activity back in, and then be prepared that calories will be changing day in and day out if your activity level is changing.
I think for me, I use them, and Steph, this might be helpful for you too. I do import my activity, but I don't let it change my settings. So my caloric goal is not changing. It's much like Dawn's. It's at the same recommendation every day. But I've used the importing, just to stay mindful of days where I'm really hungry. If I have burned 1,000 calories more than I've consumed, then maybe the next day I'll be really hungry. And that's when I look at those trends, like how many calories I've consumed versus burned. Right. And then I'll make adjustments. I'll do the same thing. I'll have a refeed. Because we're doing the summer Shape Up Challenge and I wanted to get all 12 exercises at the beginning of the month, I looked and I hadn't taken a rest day since May 29th. And I had a refeed day where I had 4,400 calories like last week. And I feel so much better now for it. But I was just a little bit low all the time. And I wouldn't have known that if I wasn't importing the exercise. So
it's very helpful, because a lot of times I think we're eating really well, or I hope you're eating well. And, after a few weeks, we start feeling different. And people don't know why. They're like, well, why am I feeling different? Why don't I have that same amount of energy? I'm like, well, when you jumped on your new nutrition plan, it was after a weekend in Vegas and you were eating garbage the entire time. So your body, pulled in that water, pulled in that glycogen and had that in your system. And it was in its storages for the next few days. So yeah, I'm looking at Jose over here, said, holy cow, 300 grams. Yeah, Jose, I mean, I've driven my carbs up to 700 grams. Like when you're eating clean, it's very difficult to do. I'm a lifetime natty, so my body processes food a lot differently than say a normal bodybuilder. I'm not a bodybuilder, I'm an athlete. And when your body is burning calories efficiently, 300 grams of carbs for me is a deficit. So I put myself into a deficit. And that's why I'm able to get ready for a cover in 2-3 weeks, because my body's always in a certain type of shape. But I also understand the importance of energy and calories. I've had friends of mine that have competed in the Olympia at 250, 260 pounds, and I eat more food than them. So again, this has been something over time, but that's what I love about Cronometer, is that if you follow the guidelines and you take your time week by week and you don't try and increase them overnight, because that's when we get discouraged, right? Someone will go, they'll put their Cronometer in, they'll be like, what? It's telling me 2,600 calories. I've been consuming 1,400 calories. How am I going to jump my calories up by 1,200? I'm like, well, it's not going to be overnight. Like maybe we take the next six weeks and we drive them 200 calories a week. So I believe in slow and steady. And I believe in this as a long-term investment. I want everyone to have a high level of energy. I want their skin to look good. I want them to be lean. I want them to be strong. I want them to have a good mood. I want them to sleep properly. Like this is something that it's like rinse and repeat. Like I never want you to feel like junk.
Mm-hmm. James has a question in the Q&A. He says that he weighs 260 pounds and runs and lifts 3 to 4 times a week. Is it possible to eat too much protein? Does excess protein get converted into fat? I ask because I look and feel better with more fiber and less protein.
Yeah, I mean, how much protein are you consuming? Do I think you can go as high as 1.25 grams per pound? Sure. What's your lifting intensity? What's your running intensity? That's other things. And then what's your activity like the rest of the day? I'll speak to a lot of people that might train 5 days a week and run 2 to 3 days a week, but they do that for an hour and a half, and then they're sitting an extra 8 to 10 hours. So, I think there's, a lot of other factors. Do I believe you're consuming too much protein where it's converted to fat? No, I don't believe that. Like, that's not happening. But if we're consuming a lot of nutrition and our body is not utilizing that, then you might feel lethargic. That could mess with sleep quality. And, where are your other macronutrients? How high are your carbs and how high are your fats? Now, I love what you just said about the fiber, because that's something that most people aren't really paying attention to. Like everyone's so caught up in protein, fat, and carbs, but well, I can consume the same amount of carbs that I just mentioned and have 10 grams of fiber in there, right? Like what am I eating? If I'm not having vegetables like a lot of bodybuilders do, or I'm just eating white rice, no nutritional value in that. And I'm just having my protein. So when you start looking at a typical bodybuilder diet for them to prep for the stage, they're eating very bland foods and they're not very nutrient dense. So I think this actually can cause a lot of problems in one's digestive system. So yes, I think the fact that, you know, as a male who's, you know, as someone, you're bigger than I am. I mean, you're 250 pounds, I'm 212 pounds, but if I'm consuming 40 grams of fiber a day, you know, I would expect you to be consuming at least 35 grams, at least. And you probably have to be more over that 40 number. So I would start looking at those numbers and start seeing, like, if you're up in that 1.25 grams per pound, which is normally what I find chronometers recommending for, you know, more of their athletes who have similar body composition goals to where I am, it will drive protein a little bit as long as their body fat's lean. And then, yeah, keeping that fiber, you know, high means that you're getting a lot of, you know, fibrous vegetables and a lot of carbohydrates that, if they are carbohydrates, they're they have fiber in it and they have nutrition in it, not where you're just consuming a carbohydrate mix with no fiber. Like, you can use that stuff, but you have to remember that you're missing that opportunity to consume something that's so important like fiber.
We got another great question in our Q&A. What is the best way to increase walking distance without killing ankles with arthritis right now? I can walk up to 2 miles on a grass or dirt surface, but if I try to do that more than 2 times a week, I'm down for the count 2 to 3 days. Currently doing salsa step with videos, strength training, YouTube videos, and walking 1 to 2 times a week. She's down 45 pounds, which is amazing, and 120 left to go, but 45 is incredible. So good job. So I guess the question is just increasing exercise without damaging ankles.
Well, I mean, you're already salsa dancing, which I technically learned to do last week, if you even want to call it. I was doing salsa dancing. It was a damn video.
Yes, you did.
It was terrible, but I really enjoyed it. But man, is that like, that's a workout, right? So if you're moving around like that, and yeah, my timing was terrible, but that's another question. That's another conversation. But yeah, so that's still going to be wear and tear in your body. So what I would recommend doing is, if more than 2 miles puts you down for the count, or 2 miles puts you down for the count, let's shorten it up. Maybe it's 1.5 miles a day. Maybe you're hitting that point where you're just overreaching and you're not recovering quick enough. So maybe start with 1 mile a day and do that 7 days a week. And then maybe bring it to 1.25 miles and do that 7 days a week. And maybe it's 1.5 and 7, and then your total amount of volume starts increasing. But I think from an arthritis standpoint, there are things nutritionally you can do, you know, getting more on an anti-inflammatory diet. I think obviously, hopefully avoiding things like sugar, huge problem, right? Alcohol, huge problem. This is all like throwing gasoline on that flame, right? Like, you're trying to put that flame out, and we're causing, you know, more negativity on the body. So, you know, I think don't overreach early on. If 2 miles is the number, I would cut it down. Let's pick a number, 1.5 miles. And remember that there's a cost to doing business. So I want you to salsa dance, a lot of movement. Maybe it's even shortening your salsa dance sessions, and not going in with this approach of like, I'm going to go high volume 2 days a week and put myself down for the count. I'm going to drop the volume, but be more consistent with it 5-6 days a week. And if you do that, that is more of a consistent approach. That is more, you know, I always say to people, they're like, oh my God, I wish I can work out. And I'm like, well, why can't you? I'm like, oh my God. Like, every time I get to minute 25 on the workout, like, I just lose interest. And I'm like, all right, so I'll create a 22-minute workout for them. Like, if you're that precise, or a 20-minute workout for them. Like, is that enough? Like, of course it's enough. Like, it's just getting you to do something is enough. If 15 minutes is the number, I might have you do 12 minutes. Like, I'm always trying to take a minimalistic approach and come in underneath just a little bit, to the point where you're coming back the next day hungry, to the point where you're like, I can do this again. I want to do this again. I very rarely am beating someone to death during a workout to where you have to lay there for 3 hours. Like, the people that I've worked with in the past, I want to shut them off right at that point where they want to keep going, but I don't let them keep going. I have them come back the next day or the day after. So taking that minimalistic approach, I think, is a good approach that you should focus on.
We have a question. This one hits home for me. I would also like to know why I sometimes get huge cravings, especially for sugars and fats, such cravings make me break my daily caloric limits and I feel guilty about it. I tried taking all the addictive foods out of my pantry, but saw cashew butter on sale, bought it and finished the whole jar in one sitting, along with a full pack of rice cakes I enjoyed, but then was consumed by guilt the next day. This happens 2 or 3 times a month. How can I fight it? For me, I'll just touch on this one on a personal note, because that sounds like a cycle that I used to be caught in as well. And Dawn can obviously touch on this after, but for me, it just became more of everything in moderation. I wasn't black and white about foods anymore. If there was something I really wanted to consume, then I would, in a small dose. And I think that having the mindset that there's no good or bad food, because food doesn't have morals, really changed. Because as soon as something wasn't forbidden for me anymore, I certainly didn't want it as badly. But that's just,
I think it's a nice mindset, right? Yeah, I mean, listen, I totally agree with that, but I also understand that, you know, if we overdo things, and you know this, like, bad things can come of it. Now, a lot of times when people in the evenings are craving foods, and think about it right now, how many of you out there, you know, might, you know, you wake up and you have health, I'm not saying enough, but like healthy foods, right? Like, well, I had a healthy breakfast. I had 2 hard-boiled eggs and I had a piece of fruit. And then, you know, I had a banana at 10 o'clock, and then lunch, I had a salad with chicken or fish, or, right. You start adding up, you start looking at these foods and they seem very healthy, and they are healthy. The problem is that when your calories are that low during the day, you're thinking about work, you're thinking about your kids, your family, and you're moving around. When you get home at night and you kick those feet up, right? And you relax and you decompress and you take a deep breath, and you know that ice cream's in the freezer, or those cookies are in the pantry. You start playing this mental tug of war with yourself, right? Because your body is deprived of nutrition. So I'll tell you right now, 10 out of 10 times, if I want to get someone to stop cheating on their food or eating too much, I increase their calories during the day. So I actually have them eat a lot more of the good stuff. So when they roll in the evening, they're not into a deficit. But I agree with Elisa. Once we build some consistency and you turn around and you go out, or Elisa's going out to dinner, or she sees something on the menu and she's like, oh my God, I want to have that. Like, that's what I want you guys to do it, right? Like, it's the random Tuesday night when you're home and you're trying to get the ball rolling. That's when I don't want you opening that bottle of wine with your spouse. Or like, those are the times where I'm like, save it for the special occasion. And I think in today's day and age, people are trying to, we're all promoting empowerment, right? But we also need to understand that when you turn around, you're like, we'll have the cake, we'll have the pizza. And these publications are saying that, like, if you abuse these sort of things, you're going to put on body fat. You're going to feel like garbage. So my goal for everyone is, I want to get everyone that I work with's body composition to a point where when they look at themselves naked, they're happy with themselves. Or when they turn around and they wake up, they have a high level of energy. And then when they want to turn around and they want to go have a pizza, or they want to go have ice cream, they do what Elisa just said, and they do it, and it's part of the program. It's not that they failed. And that's why I don't believe in New Year's resolutions, because I don't think we should be giving, I kept giving this analogy at DonCon. If someone had chocolate cake 365 days last year, well, they probably really love chocolate cake, right? If they're going to give it up now indefinitely, what happens when they decide to have a taste or a piece? That's when they throw their hands up and like, well, I broke that streak, it's over. Where no, it's like, don't have it 365 days. Have it, once a week. Still do it because you enjoy it, but do it in some moderation. So there's 2 answers to the question. I agree with Elisa 100%. Take that mindset, develop that willpower to where you can have it, enjoy it, and understand that this is part of the plan, but also understanding that if you are in such a deficit throughout the day and you're coming into the evening, your body's smart. Again, it's saying, give me calories. I don't have enough energy. I don't have enough energy to support the 2 classes I took today, or the 5-mile run I went on, or the fact I was working in New York City running around and I got 20,000 steps in. Like, how is 1,200 calories a day going to support that? And that's why sometimes with things like Chronometer, though people have come to me in the past and like, well, I'm stressed out when I track. I'm like, well, maybe you're stressed out when you track because it's something new. but tracking is going to give you answers to questions that you've been unable to answer. Because if you're having 4 meals a day one day and you're having 5 another day and 6 another day, well, then your calories are all over the place. There's no consistency. So I think tracking sometimes, though, most people come to me, oh, I'm stressed. Well, it's just something new. It'd be like driving a car for the first time. If you're an adult driving a car for the first time, you're going to be stressed. If you go on my boat and I give you the keys, and I say, drive this and pull this into that dock, you're going to be stressed, right? Like we get stressed out when we're in environments, where we're doing things that we're not used to doing.
I think just getting curious too about your nutrition. Like I was logging everything I was eating all the time, regardless, like before I had a mentality that if I started eating something that was off plan, I would stop logging, but then I committed to just logging regardless. And when I saw how much sugar I was consuming, it was an eye opener. So I think sometimes just focusing on the nutrients as well goes a long way. Mm-hmm. We have a question from Cindy in the Q&A. Why can't we export our daily nutrition summaries to an Excel spreadsheet? You actually can do that. There's a way to export to a CSV. We'll get that linked. Hopefully Emily or Gabby are still here and can do the data export user manual article there. Are fruits our friends, or is the sugar in fruit just as bad as the sugar in candy and cookies?
No, I mean, sugar, if you're having fruit, right, and then you're normally consuming a lot of the fiber from fruit. Now, different fruits have different, levels of sugar, right? Dates, very sugary, not a lot of fiber, right? Berries, lower in sugar, more fibrous, like more, I believe, more nutritional benefits to that. It doesn't mean I'm not consuming dates, right? I just might turn around and I might consume, if I'm having a post-workout meal, and my carbs are coming in a little bit low and I need to bump my carbs up a little bit, 2 Metahul dates, post-workout is a great way to get some simple sugars into my body that are healthy. But by no means are there anywhere near, a chemically made, piece of, candy. It's real sugar. They're putting a lot of dyes in it. They're putting a lot of other names that I can't even pronounce. So yeah, not the same thing. I think what starts becoming tricky is when you're drinking, processed fruit juice, right? If there's no fiber, there's no pulp in it. And if you think about it, if you were to squeeze an orange right now, you're going to get probably this much juice out of it. Though when we turn around, we pour a glass of juice, we're pouring this much. So think about the amount of oranges you would have to squeeze to get that much juice. So I think sometimes with sugar, I always say, I really would prefer no one drink any of their sugar calories. I just think it's very dangerous. And it's a very quick way to, bring your calories up very high.
There's a question here from Paula about zone training, which I haven't dove into enough. So I'm curious about this too. Is it better to walk at zone 2 according to my age, or stay above 45% of VO2 max if goal is fat burning?
Well, I think
how do you know as well what 45% of your VO2 max is without being
you were going for VO2 training, right? I mean, Apple Watch is actually getting a little bit better now in time, letting you know roughly where your zone ranges are. So there's 5, zones, zone 1 to 5. Suddenly there's a lot of papers on zone 2 training, which is typically what bodybuilders have been doing for the last 100 years. They've been, getting on treadmills, or they've been walking, and they've been keeping their heart rate roughly in that 120 to 150 range, because it really is individualistic. It's going to be much different for me than it is for someone else who's my age, my height, my weight. We have different levels of max heart rate, et cetera. I think the question you got to ask yourself is, what is your activity level and what are your stress levels? Because for years we were hearing a lot about HIIT training, right? And honestly, most people don't even know how to categorize HIIT training, right? So, well, what is HIIT training? 90% of the classes out there are considering it HIIT. I don't consider that HIIT. I don't consider 45 seconds on, 10 seconds off, or 30 on, 30. I don't consider that HIIT training. I consider, that could be, depending on your heart rate, that could be more medium intensity, interval training. So I think it depends on your stress levels. I think it depends on your sleep. I think it depends on your nutrition. And I think it depends on your, what type of shape you're in. And, when I went in and I've done plenty of VO2 training in my life, But when I've gone in for VO2 training, it's telling me that, well, if you're at 128 beats a minute, that's where I'm going to optimize my fat burning. Maybe. Does that mean I want to be at 128 all the time? The answer is no, because I'm not just training for body composition. I'm training to be in great shape. I'm training to run, fast and long and do all these things that I need to do to feel and be an athlete. So to answer your question, it's I think zone 2 is very safe. And I think you can do a lot of it. I think HIIT training is something you can sprinkle in there, or even getting up into zone 4, et cetera. You could sprinkle that in there, but then something that seems or feels very good, if you are older, can backfire on you overnight. You suddenly get a bad night's sleep, or you're stressed out, or a relative gets sick, and out of nowhere, you're just not recovering the way that you might have recovered when you were 21 years old. And that's the thing I've noticed when I'm 46 now, is that I used to be able to frivolously throw in, I feel like going for a 6-mile run, we're going to do it. Or buddy's running a half marathon, I'm going to go run it with them. And I would run it at sprint pace. Like but now it's like, you got to think differently about that. Can you get in better shape? The answer is yes. Do I feel like I'm in some of the best shape of my life? Absolutely. Is my body composition the best it's been? Absolutely, at 46. But you got to be a little bit smarter about what you're putting in your body, how much you're partying, what your sleep quality is like, and your training intensity. Very important.
Chris asked, so we were talking about over consuming calories. Mm-hmm. Chris has a great question about people that have a difficult time getting enough calories. Picky eaters, what are some calorie dense foods for someone who's trying to gain weight and needs extra calories for lifting?
I want to take this. I feel like I'm talking too much here.
You would know this, especially for lifting, better than I would. If someone wants to go for a run and eat a lot of bread, they can ask me.
I'm joking. I'm joking. I feel weird. Anytime I'm on with someone, I'm doing all the talking. It's always
it's like you're in headlights look. I'm like, no, you should.
Yeah, Chris, listen, great question. So you got to look at foods, right? And how easily they're going to go down. Like something like a sweet potato might be very fibrous. And when I, was prepping for, several covers of Muscle and Fitness or Men's Health, I would consume a bunch of them. But for me to get a certain amount of carbohydrates through sweet potato, it's almost impossible. Like I found that if you're trying to really get your carbs up, and on days where I was getting them up to maybe 600-700 grams of carbs, there were a couple of hacks I'm going to give you right now. One, jasmine rice, very easy. Like I can eat a cup to 2 cups of jasmine rice so easily. 8 ounces of sweet potato, a little bit more challenging. So if you look at 2 cups of jasmine rice and 8 ounces of sweet potato, the carb difference is here and here, and I can get this down and I'm still hungry. That's one. I'll find a no sugar added muesli, and I'll use that with almond milk. Again, very fibrous, very nutritious, but I can easily get 80 grams of carbohydrates into my system through some muesli. Organic dates, like I mentioned earlier. Oh my God. 4 to 5 dates, which you can get in after a workout. Again, you're looking into that 80 grams of carbs, roughly that range, maybe even more. Really, really simple. You can also start looking at intra-carbohydrate mixes. Now, I don't work with any company that, but there are good companies out there like UCAN, I really like, or Vitargo, and you could turn around and get an easy 50 grams of carbs in during a workout. What I would do is a little hack is, 2 scoops of Vitargo is like 70 grams of carbs, 2 scoops of UCAN is like 50 grams of carbs. So depending on the carb mix I wanted to use, mixing some branched chain amino acids in from Thorne, shaking it up, sipping that throughout the workout. So let me tell you how easy. Rice cakes, you can get some rice cakes in, really very quickly to digest, very easy to get down. So I think as long as that fiber number is up, like I discussed, and for most men, I'm looking for over 35 grams, and you're not sitting there eating plain rice cakes all day, plain jasmine rice all day, and you're not getting vegetables, because again, we don't have fiber, helps us detox and pass things through our body. Very important. So there are some really good hacks. Those are some great hacks that I mentioned. There are also a lot more that we can continue to go into depending on where someone's carb level needs to be. But I would start there with those basic ones. And, I would still take your time and bring in those numbers up. But I think carbs are the easiest thing to hit, especially when you start mixing in things like jasmine rice and muesli, and you get a lot of fiber through muesli. So, you could do a sweet potato, you could do jasmine rice, you could do muesli, you could do fruit, like already there. I just named 4 really easy ways to get those carbs up. And then you can mix in, you know, your quinoa or your sweet potato or whatever it is, like easy ways to turn around and get those more nutritious carbohydrates in there, which are going to cover you. What is so funny, Lisa? I love how she just starts laughing.
I do. I just got called out on my bagel consumption. You know what? I wasn't called out, but I love that.
How good is a crispy toasted bagel? Do you eat them toasted?
I have a bagel every day. A toasted bagel.
It might be. I could eat like. I never really said. I love bagels and I love cereal. Like those can be like if there are 2 foods right there I wanted to convert, where you can just eat an unlimited amount besides hamburgers and pizza. Like that would be them definitely.
Whenever I'm always so curious about what 3 foods people would eat if they were stuck on an island for the rest of their life, and mine is bagel and cream cheese.
Oh God!
I just jalapeno Asiago bagel.
I've never tried cream cheese. Never tried. Never had it. No, listen to me. I've never. This is just because it grosses me out. Cream cheese, sour cream, mayonnaise, cottage cheese. Never tried it. I won't try it. I refuse.
Cream cheese is like
Can't do it.
It's happiness in a tub.
I can't do it.
I actually came home just today, and my dog had her flat ears back, which is like bad dog ears, and she took the tub of cream cheese off my counter. Don't judge me for leaving it on my counter, and ate it all. So you know what? Yeah, cream cheese is life. It is done. Next time I see you, we're eating cream cheese.
No way. I'll throw up. I can't do it. I can't do it. It's terrible.
That's madness. Kimber asked, how do I begin to have sugar show up in my tracking? Thanks for sharing about tracking everything. Kimber, Emily did drop a suggestion. You can see it in your daily report or your nutrition report. For me personally, I have the gold subscription of the Cronometer app, obviously. And I actually wanted to be super mindful about my sugar consumption. So I set it as one of my 8 highlighted nutrients. So I'm looking at it every day. You know, there's the diary header on the top that has the calorie circles or the macro breakdown. If you go one over there, those are my highlighted nutrients, and I have sugar tracked on there. So we could absolutely drop that as well. It just helps me stay mindful at a glance about it, but you can also tap on any of the calorie circles and it'll bring up your daily report, and you can see there. If you don't have a gold subscription, send me an email and I'll hook you up with Trello. But yeah, Emily is definitely on the ball and just dropped how to do the highlighted nutrient targets in mobile, which is amazing. Everyone, actually, Rudy agrees with you that they don't like cream cheese as well. But I think cream cheese is life as a shirt that I would wear. 100%. Okay, James asked us another question. Yeah, perfect, Kimber, that's great. And thank you for everyone who subscribes to Gold. We really appreciate you a lot. Assuming no dietary or gastro issues, what are your thoughts on milk? A2 versus whole milk versus almond milk versus soy milk versus oat milk. Yeah, does milk even matter?
It's my opinion right now. I really don't think it does. I think there's other ways you can get your vitamin D, your calcium in. You know, if you can tolerate dairy, then okay. Do I want you sitting here drinking glasses of milk? If you enjoy a glass of milk a day, all right, and you're not dairy intolerant. I know how my body gets. I mean, I'm not dairy intolerant, but my body doesn't look as sharp and I don't feel as sharp when I'm consuming a lot of dairy in there. Doesn't mean I won't have whey. It doesn't mean I won't have a Greek yogurt on occasion. But you know, how much is the question? And, you know, how are you handling it? That's the next question. But if it's something where it's like gluten, right? Does our body need it? The answer is no. Our body doesn't need gluten. But if you're not gluten intolerant and, you know, you want, and there's a little gluten in maybe a wrap or this and that, do I care about that? No. Do I want you consuming globs of gluten? The answer is no, I don't. So I think it's the same thing with dairy.
It looks like we have one more question. Someone there's another question. Can we get a step below Gold membership just to get rid of the ads? No, sadly not. We don't have an ad-free version of Cronometer, but you can send me a message. I'll type my email in there right now. I can hook you up with gold for a little bit so you can have it advertisement free, but that isn't something that we offer. Oh, you're welcome. So one question to summarize really quickly. Somebody trains intensely 4 to 5 times a week and they want to look fuller. Should they increase their carb intake? Should carbs only be consumed the day of or around workouts? Can muscles be built on low carb or no carb at all?
Can muscle be built on low carb or no carb? I mean, I wouldn't recommend trying. I mean, where are you going to get your calories from, right? You would have to drive your fat so high. Now, for some reason, unless you are purposely consuming a fat adapted diet or you're on a ketogenic diet, no, it's definitely not the best way to put muscle on. Do I think it's impossible? The answer is no. I think, I definitely, it's very, very, very difficult to do. But if you're feeling flat, and that's a term I like to use with people who are very lean already, but aren't holding the muscle fullness, I would definitely drive carbohydrates. That's what I would, I mean, personally for myself, 100%, I would drive carbohydrates. But I've also seen people who are, on too low fat diets that when we started bringing up fats, that allowed them to feel fuller and it allowed them to stay satiated longer. Sometimes when you're just doing protein and carbs and your fats are too low, your body will rip through those meals a lot quicker, which is why people feel themselves getting hungry after eating like egg whites and oatmeal 2 hours later. Why am I hungry? Why am I always hungry? I'm like, well, you don't have enough fats in there. So hope that answers your question. I think I believe in metabolic flexibility. I believe that, we can develop flexibility, use carbs and fats as our energy source. And again, I think it's something that needs to be earned. I think it can take some time, but if you're someone who has never consumed carbohydrates and your body's used to using protein and fat, yes, of course, if you consumed 200 grams of carbs overnight, like, I don't know what's going to happen. Are you going to get full? Or is your body going to get pumped? Are you going to feel fat? Are you looking at the scale to quantify success? Are you saying, oh my God, I gained 5 pounds? Why? I mean, we also have to ask that question, guys. How are we quantifying success with all this? I'd prefer when we're making nutritional changes, you can keep an eye on a scale maybe every week, but use it as a guide. Don't use it to dictate or make any spontaneous decisions. Or, oh my God, I gained 2 pounds. I don't want to be losing weight. Like, I can't tell you how many people, my community's got 10,000 people in it. And I can't tell you how many people that we've had follow Cronometer and we've taken their time bringing their calories up. I can mention her name, Laura Andrews, right now, completely one of our people. She's consuming 3,300 calories a day. It's a woman who's built like Elisa, and you met her. You met her at DonCon. 3,400 calories a day. And she's like, I'm hungry. What should I do? I'm like, eat more food. This has taken us years to build her metabolism to be like that. But I'd want it that way. I'd rather you be able to consume nutrition and have your body strong and energetic, not where you go on vacation and you come home and you're ready to hang yourself because you're like, oh my God, I gained 7 pounds. Like, it's not fat, it's water. Let's get back to our principles, but don't be panicked. See you guys. Don't be panicked.
This has been great. If anyone has any questions and we've missed them, then you can send me an email. I drop my email. It's elisa@cronometer.com, or you can DM us on Instagram, send us a message on Facebook. My name is very confusing. It's ELIISA @cronometer.com. Thanks, Gabby. Just put it in there again. Don, you're all
that's very nice. Jose, that's very nice of you. And guys, if you have any questions, shoot me a DM. Guys, I love coming on here. I love answering questions. I've been in the industry now over 25 years. And I've really made it my mission to combine the worlds of performance and physique. Performance is about quality. It's about how are our bodies built, how healthy are we, but to take our shirt off and look a certain way. And that's why a lot of the celebrities have come to me over the last 2 decades plus. So always happy to help. Elisa, thank you so much. My best to the Cronometer family, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Bye, guys.